Let's explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Hello, everybody, for this week's Breaking History, where once again I'm happy to be joined back after a far too long of a sojourn with Gordon, aka Ghost of Based Patrick Henry. Gordon, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm okay. It's been a long time, Gordon. How you? Yeah, I mean, the world's been moving so fast. I'm sure we're gonna have a lot to talk about. And right now, the World Economic Forum. I was just listening before today's show to the recording of Trump's speech. He gives good speeches. He gives very good speeches. There's some busting a gut, laugh out loud moments that I really appreciated. But I figured we'll start today by just going through the battles at the World Economic Forum. Where do you see things? What stood out to you? I know you've been covering this thing pretty closely. What stood out to you as the most interesting, poignant moments of Trump's message, or the broader World Economic Forum battle lines that you're seeing?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, honestly, it's like the fact that there's been so much narrative chaos, so to speak, sown really by Trump. I mean, when you think about the stuff that he's done and the stuff that he said and the things that have occurred over the past 3 weeks. I mean, we're going back to January 3rd when Nicolas Maduro was extracted from Caracas and put in prison, ostensibly, in New York City. I mean, people like this meeting, this Davos confab really snuck up on us. I mean, we were pointing it out and people were talking about it happening, but there was really very little focus on it just because so many things have been happening between Venezuela, Greenland, Iran, the Board of Peace. I mean, this month, this January has just been slammed packed with geopolitical happenings, and I think all that's largely been by design by Trump, so that when he walks into this place, it is like absolute panic and chaos among these elites, and you're seeing it in the way that they have spoken. I don't know if you've paid attention to what like Larry Fink and even Mark Carney are saying, and Macron and all the others, but they're acknowledging that their system has failed and that they basically have to regroup and basically come face to face with reality if they have any chance of preserving themselves. It's pretty amazing.
There definitely is, it seems at least, a certain, albeit incompetent, but still very real recognition and some eating of humble pie, which has been forced upon a lot of these wind-up toys called politicians, technocratic politicians that have been like a little bit too comfortable in their positions over the past decades. And I did listen to Carney's speech. I mean, it sounded kind of like he had Jeffrey Sachs like write it for him.
Yeah.
It's I think it's something which a lot of Canadians are freaking out about. And a lot of people who are trying to approach this from a bottom-up standpoint tend to get like sucked into a lot of the narrative traps that have been created for them in the minefield by our very intelligence agencies that have been, running our deep state apparatus on behalf of foreign agents. And I'm not talking about Russia and China here, for many generations. Yeah. But now, a lot of Canadians are freaking out because they see that Carney has been working very hard to try to seduce and build a relationship with China. And he gave a very, I would say, almost intentionally provocative speech about a week ago, saying that now Canada and China will usher in the new world order. And it's almost like he did that knowing what the psychology is of the mass of conservatives in his in his country. He knew exactly what that would trigger, but he did it anyway. And it's freaking a lot of people out. And I don't think that they appreciate how the battle lines are being drawn and how things are being fought, because Canada is not a thing. And that's an important thing as well. Like he's in his speech at Davos trying to act like, we have to stand up for even though the rules-based order was always a fraud and we were playing along with it, we have to still stand up for it against, the might makes right doctrine of Trump. And he's trying to use this language to seduce his Chinese counterpart, saying, look, the U.S. is bullying you. They're bullying us. Let's let bygones be bygones. Forget that we're run by the British Empire. Forget that we're just a tool of the British Empire, to the same thing that did the the century of humiliation, the opium wars that sought to destroy you and enslave you for so long. Forget all of that, and let's just start, working together and have a happy, kumbaya now against the U.S. And most people, they completely miss that. But I do really, really appreciate the contrast when Trump did get up there. You're dealing with a human being who's not a wind-up doll. He's not speaking from behind weird sunglasses after gotten beat. I don't know what Macron thought he was hiding when he put on those sunglasses. That was weird. But yeah. I did Trump's little jab to say they're beautiful sunglasses. But was definitely speaking as a human being without a script, and that I always very much appreciate. Whether the question of energy, Greenland, you name it, there was a very, very human type of approach that is intentionally disrupting the game board. So I don't know if you want to add a little bit more to your thoughts about his approach to. Did you expect him to bring in the Greenland question right there at that venue, or were you a bit surprised by that?
What, to bring Greenland in as
into his because he said, like midway, he's like, I wasn't going to talk about Greenland, but people would be disappointed with me if I didn't. So here it is, and then he just like unloads this pretty heavy call to action. So I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, the Greenland thing is really interesting because Putin has come in. I don't know if you saw his speech from like 2 days ago, where some forum in Russia, but he got up and he gave a history lesson on the U.S. and Greenland. And he was saying it in support of what Trump is doing. He's saying Trump is this is like a legitimate, earnest effort that Trump is doing, and it's for global security. It's for all the right reasons. He's doing this for all the right reasons, and he has every right to do it. And he talked about in the 1860s how America was going to buy Greenland, but there was still so much bad press around the purchase of Alaska from Russia that it didn't have the support of Congress, so it didn't go through. And then they tried to do it again.
In the 1860s or 1960s?
He said 1860s. He said in the 1860s that Andrew Johnson. It was unclear whether he meant Andrew Johnson, and I haven't fact checked it yet, but he was unclear whether he meant, and it may have been a translation issue, whether he meant Andrew Johnson was against it or for it. Sounds like he was saying Andrew Johnson was for it and Congress didn't support it. But yeah, basically the purchase of Alaska was right on the tail end of it, according to Putin, which is going to be the purchase of Greenland. But the press was just slamming the government for having purchased Alaska, saying that it was, it's an ice box, it's a garden of polar bears. Those are the quotes that Putin cited. And because of that, there was no congressional mandate or public mandate behind purchasing Greenland. Then he said there was a trilateral agreement in place between the UK, Germany, and the US in 1910, where Greenland was supposed to go to, no, maybe it was Denmark. It was Denmark, Germany, in the US, where he said that Greenland was going to go to the US. That all fell apart right before World War I, and then basically the world wars put all that on hold. And then he said during World War II, as Trump said, that the Germans took Greenland from Denmark, and there's the Americans that had to play defense. So, Putin is sitting there laying narrative shielding for Trump, saying this is totally legitimate. What he's doing is fine. Meanwhile, like Stephen Miller and Trump surrogates are going out on television being like, yeah, who's going to stop us? Like we do whatever the hell we want because we're the strong man. Who's going to stop us? And when you stop and you listen to Mark Carney's speech, the first 5 minutes of it sounds like it was written by Chris Paul because he cites that guy, Václav Havel, the former
Václav Havel, yeah.
Václav Havel, the former Czech president, I guess.
Yeah.
In that essay that he wrote.
Yeah, like what allows communism to succeed is the shopkeeper going out and just doing his thing.
People participating in rituals, knowing privately that what they're doing, that it's all fake and gay. It's not violence or the threat of violence that keeps the communist system perpetuating. It's people willingly participating in fake and gay rituals that they know are fake, and they know that it's all fraud, but they still wake up in the morning and they go and participate in it, right? Yeah. Out of fear of like social consequences for doing that. And I just think about like all the existential stuff and esoteric stuff that like epistemology that Chris always talks about, and how we are guilty of that too. We get up and we participate in fake elections. We participate in a super fake government. I mean, our government has been totally illegitimate for a long time. We openly talk about how our government is bought and paid for by foreign like interests and does not serve us. And yet we sit here and people hold online discussions with strangers about who the best fake puppet politician is going to be for us to go get behind and support. You know, I mean, it's so funny because like Mark Carney was literally describing why fake elections keep happening and like why does MAGA even participate in that? MAGA does participate in that. And it like that I thought was hilarious. But again, I think what Trump is doing here is he, like over the past 3 or 4 weeks, is he's engaging in a form of power projection that was always part of the system that Mark Carney and his friends established. Like Mark Carney was sitting there denigrating the very thing that him and his central banker friends set up, like the global hegemony. And he's sitting there saying, why have we participated in this global hegemony? Why are we sitting here and tacitly, quietly endorsing it by waking up every day, even though they were the ones who created it, right? But it's because I think Trump has made it a cartoon. He's made it a wrestling soap opera where they are openly going, like Stephen Miller is openly going on Fox News and saying, you and what army, Europe? Like, who is going to stop us? If we want to go take Greenland, nobody's going to stop us. That is an imperialist mindset, but it really is taking the entire idea of unipolar hegemony and turning it on its head. In an age of like tolerance and, you know, like passive aggressiveness, where like that whole energy has really dominated the political rhetoric, and people have rejected the idea of like might makes right. Now all of a sudden we're talking about might makes right and whether or not that is the way things are.
Yeah, no, I think it's so disingenuous. All of those who are championing, you know, and trying to like use this virtue signaling, disgusting tactic of defending the rules-based international order that's somehow been this wonderful thing that we've had to organize ourselves and our decision making for decades and decades around, in opposition to you know, this very lowly, primitive, might makes right type of approach. But I mean, the whole thing has always been might makes right, like you've made the point. It's just that you have like these it's almost like people who play not video games, board games a little bit too much and take the board game seriously, but the board game itself is not the way the world is supposed to work. And if you break the rules of the board game, all of a sudden these, you know, you could see these types of nerds getting completely pissed, enraged that you're doing it, because by following the rules of the rigged game, that's how they win. That's how they impose their might onto you. It's by getting you to do it yourself, by playing false rules that are designed to lead you into your own annihilation. So to say that might makes right is something that we thought we left behind is an insane idea. It's a completely disingenuous lie. But now the question is like, well, okay, what is legitimate might? Is it based upon natural law? Like power is something that we all have as an agency to do, to express our will, to express our thoughts, our ideas, our intentions. That's why we have a power, and we can increase our power or we can reduce our power as individuals or as family units or as societies as a whole more broadly. You know, if you learn new skills, your power to do things increases. Your power to actualize potential increases. The question is then, are you doing it in harmony with God's creation, or are you doing it out of whack with God's creation? And I think the oligarchical system is always wielding power out of, it's an empire of lies, right? So they're always in defiance of this other thing. So I think the idea now of like, well, why, upon what basis is the new system going to be wired? Is it going to be wired upon an idea of morality, of thinking about our kids, our grandkids, of building something better than we left behind, or not? And I think that did come across in, what do you got there?
I mean, this is an article from January 8th. And the quote from Trump is, I don't need international law. And they asked him, well, what is stopping you? Like what are the limits? Because, you know, Congress tried to pass that measure, like to limit what he's allowed to do in Venezuela, right? Congress was saying, well, we don't want Trump declaring war on Venezuela. And now that he's captured their president, and Trump was, you know, mocking Congress for doing that. And so then he was asked, well, what's stopping you? Like, what is holding you back? And Trump says, the only thing that can stop me is my own morality. Like he said, I don't need international law, because all the reporters are saying, well, you're violating international law. Like everyone's saying that. And Trump's like, what is international law? Like, there's no such thing as international law. Like, international law, that would imply there's a global government. He didn't say that, but that would imply there's a global government. There's no global government, right? It's just rules that people have agreed to follow, but nobody actually follows them. And when you stop and you think about like the comparison between Iraq and Venezuela and how we handled Iraq and how we handled Venezuela, you know, George Bush fed us all this bullshit about why we were going into Iraq. And it was all about like whatever, democracy or weapons of mass destruction or whatever. I mean, whatever it is, right? It was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It was democracy in Syria. It was, you know, democracy in Venezuela, whatever the arguments were that George Bush gave, which for imposing ourselves on these lesser countries. But the reality is it was always might makes right. We just put window dressing on it all. And instead, Trump has openly been like, we're going into Venezuela to take the oil. We're going into Venezuela to take out the dictator. We're going into Venezuela for all these cartoonish reasons that were actually the reasons we went into Iraq and Syria and all these other places, but none of our politicians had the balls to admit that. Meanwhile, all the analysts are like, clearly this is the reason we're going in there.
Yeah, it's being candid is already the first step to healing. Just to say, like, you know, just to say the true reason why you would do something, which is never done under the age of globalization. Everything destructive is done for the sake of promoting peace, prosperity, you know, international big kumbayas. But the reality is always the opposite happens. Impoverishment increases, terrorism increases. None of the promises of stability ever occur. So now we have the Gaza Board of Peace, which is coming online. It seems like there's a growing array of members who have been invited to join. I think Putin officially said that he would be participating, right, as a member, I believe, right? Well,
last I saw last night, like they haven't given the official yes.
It wasn't the official? Okay, I thought it was
like that's what Dmitry Peskov said. He said they're still evaluating the document. What Sergei Lavrov said, Sergei Lavrov had a clip because he was speaking at a forum yesterday.
Yeah. And
he said that he was the one who actually came out and explained that this thing is going to be about way more than just the Gaza war. He said, well, written in a charter. They sent us a charter. First, they sent us an invitation. Then they sent us a charter, like an addendum, an annex with it. And in the charter, it says that this is that they're going to be pursuing other areas of interest aside from Gaza, like the other 7 or 8 wars that Trump says he's resolved, haven't actually resolved. And so Sergei Lavrov just said, we just need to evaluate it fully and get clarity and understand how this thing's going to operate before we can fully commit to it. But Dmitry Kirill Dmitriev is all but signaled that they're going to accept it. I mean, he's been
that's what I'd read his tweet, which indicated that there was a positive acceptance. But I guess we have to wait for the official statement. But I know we also have Lukashenko. We've got Orban also have said that they're going to be a part of this thing.
Lukashenko's already he filmed himself signing the agreement to send back. So Lukashenko's like Belarus is 100% in. Belarus is an extension of Moscow. I mean, they're like he is a satellite of Putin, and he pretty much is open about that. And so that is the signal that Putin is definitely going to join. It's just going to be, I think, a little bit more. They're going to milk it, I think, a little more than just being like, oh yeah, right.
So are they being invited to join the executive board or the Gaza Board of Peace? Because I know you have two kind of boards that interface. One is sort of the executive branch, which has Trump as the chair, and I think Tony Blair is on both, and there's some better people, some bad people on both. But is he going to be on the are these world leaders invited to join the executive board or the other one?
That's a good question. So my understanding, the way it's set up is you have the Board of Peace, which is basically the general body, and Trump has invited roughly 60 countries to join that Board of Peace. And then within the Board of Peace, you have executive committees, and these executive committees are the ones that will actually be tasked with addressing specific incidents. So the first executive committee is the Gaza Executive Committee, and that's supposed to be an 8-person board. And so far, I believe the members of it will be Trump, Erdogan, Kushner, Wickoff, I think Rubio, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Rubio, Mark Rowan.
Yeah, and then like you said, Tony Blair, which is that's a wild card, but it's an interesting wild card because he's been a career opponent of Netanyahu. It sounds like Netanyahu may or may not get that position, but Israel is being very wishy-washy, like disclosing their involvement in this because of the internal politics in Israel. Bezalel Smotrich has openly said now that this is the finance minister, that he thinks that they should dismantle, they should literally physically tear down the command center that the U.S. military has built in Israel, where everyone is operating out of, and kick everybody out of Israel. Because he said there's no way we can allow Turks and Qataris to come in here on our soil and basically run Gaza, because he said they are Hamas. So we therefore have to physically tear down this building and kick everybody out. So Netanyahu, like, it took many days for Israel to even admit they had been invited. The Israeli press was saying that, oh, wow, all this is happening without Netanyahu and without Israel's involvement. What a clown show, like that Netanyahu's allowed this to happen. And then they finally came out and said, yeah, we did get invited. We're mulling it over. Like, we're discussing whether we're going to join. So it's unclear whether Netanyahu was also invited to the executive board. I wouldn't be surprised to see him not get invited. My guess is that we're going to get the team of, like, Trump's team, which is Kushner, Wickoff, Rubio. We'll probably see, I would imagine, Tom Barrack join. That would make sense. We may see what's his name, the hostage negotiator, join, because he's been pretty key in all this stuff. And then I think we'll see Erdogan. We'll see Tamim from Qatar, and then maybe Putin. I think Putin would make the most sense to round out the team. And really what this does is this, and the reason Putin would make the most sense is because, 20% of all Israeli citizens have Russian citizenship. They're dual citizens with Russia. There's more dual citizens for Russia in Israel than they are American dual citizens.
Yes.
So it would make sense then that Putin would be involved in this. And I think the stage is set. Number one, they have openly whined, like the globalists have openly whined, that this thing is threatening the UN. Trump was openly asked yesterday, is this meant to replace the UN? And he said, well, maybe it will. The UN's been kind of useless. Like, their whole mandate has been like for their existence has been to, sow peace and to mediate conflict, mediate wars. And they've failed to do that. And they're throughout their entire existence. So, we'll let them continue to operate because they have great potential, but they just are failing daily. So we will step in and fill the void. And so there's going to be a competition now between which has more legitimacy in the public mind, the Board of Peace, the UN. And that's like the sovereign alliance against the unipolar hegemony.
Yeah, feasibly. Yeah. I mean, I guess the battle here over the new system, which is going to involve more of an active role of, I guess you could say, these two different ideas of might and power, because I think you have a recognition that the old system, the old set of rules is finished. It's gone. So now the new thing is going to be much more of an active, bilateral decision making. The presence of human minds, for good or for bad, are going to be much more active in making policy decisions than they were, let's say, since JFK was murdered. So that's going to be more present. The question now is, what is the character of those minds? Because I guess the battle in my mind that I'm mapping out here is that you have Tony Blair, who was among the first in 1998 or 1999, right, when he went to Chicago and he gave his famous Chicago speech calling forth the Blair Doctrine, where he was making the argument that the old system of the Westphalian Treaty, the Westphalian system that generated the modern nation states as we know them, is outdated and must come to an end and be replaced by what he was promoting with Lord, Mark Malloch Brown at the very same time. Mark Malloch Brown was the Secretary General or the Undersecretary of the United Nations, and both of them together were putting forth what's called responsibility to protect, the R2P protocol. And they were enshrining that into the UN Charter for the first time to abrogate the different aspects of the UN Charter that had formerly made invading small countries illegal since World War II. And they said, no, the R2P policy has got to transcend that, because we need to go. They were basically preparing. They were saying we need to go and invade Yugoslavia. We got to bomb Serbia, Kosovo. They were making the argument that we shouldn't have pesky international law preventing us from doing those things. Or as we discovered later on, they were clearly also thinking about their oncoming 9/11 operation and bombing countries to save them for the sake of bringing liberal markets and democracy into Iraq and Afghanistan and what have you.
Kill them to save them, right?
Yeah, burn the village to save the village type of shit, right? So you got that type of doctrine, which is being, I think they didn't let that go, but I think they're trying to fight to. I guess that's the battle line that I see right now, is that you've got agencies that are trying to impose that R2P liberal imperialism idea, and then you've got those who would prefer a much more moral idea of breaking the rules for the sake of a higher moral law. Because you could break the rules lawfully or you could break the rules unlawfully. If you break them lawfully, it's because the rules themselves were unlawful. They were man-made rules, and they were, in fact, because they were unlawful, because they were immoral, they were designed by following them to enslave and thus, like St. Augustine had made the point, that those types of laws should not be followed, that they're simply another form of violence, and as such should be overthrown. I think the founding fathers, all legitimate revolutionaries, think in those terms. And then but then one could say, oh, but that's Bolshevik, communist, anarchism. Yes. And that's bad. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily. Because if they're abiding by a higher law, then it's not the same thing as somebody just overthrowing laws for the sake of laws, because it's like, preventing them from doing whatever they want to do. Like, let's say a Crowleyite or some Luciferian, they might have this radical idea that because laws exist, I can't do whatever I want to do. It's like, well, sometimes what you want to do is downright criminal and bad for your soul and for society as a whole. You shouldn't necessarily think that that's the cause of your pure freedom. Maybe some laws are actually necessary and good. So you want to be careful philosophically. So again, when I look at Tony Blair on the board of peace, and I guess we have to do some background checks on some of the other technocrats that are a part of it. Maybe Netanyahu, who doesn't like Blair, but at the same time, he also has a very similar problematic way of thinking of what natural law is. So yeah, I think that. But when you said that Tony Blair and Netanyahu didn't like each other, do you think that that's like kayfabe, or do you think that they really don't like each other, and why?
Well, that's a good question, because I don't know. Because like Obama would be another example I would use, where it's like the presentation about Obama and Netanyahu is that they didn't like one another, and yet Obama did a number of things that Netanyahu wanted to occur. The biggest one, of course, being the Iran nuclear deal. That was like a Netanyahu brainchild, right?
Yes.
And Obama's the one who did it. The creation of ISIS. I mean, that was done by the Obama State Department in coordination with Mossad, right, and NATO and a number of other countries. So, like that was kayfabe. I mean, Obama acting like he didn't like Netanyahu and he wasn't like on board with the Israeli agenda. That was kayfabe. Tony Blair could have been the same thing. And it's not that Tony Blair was like anti-Israel or anti-Zionism. It's that Tony Blair was in the Ehud Barak camp. So like Ehud Barak is the guy who runs for prime minister in 1990. I think it's 1998 or 1999. Netanyahu's hit with a bunch of scandals, and I can't remember if that was when he tried to kill Mossad, the leader of the Mossad goes into Jordan. I don't know if that was in the 90s or if that was I think it was in the late 90s. The Mossad goes into Jordan to kill the leader of Hamas, the guy who is still the ostensible leader living in Qatar these days. And they develop a spray bottle to walk up behind him and spray him in the ear. And when they go, and their plan was they had 2 operatives on the ground to do the spray, and then 2 operatives in a car for the getaway. And they were going to grab him right as he was walking out of this diplomatic center or something like that. And so it was like in this big courtyard. And so they run up and they do it, and his security forces like hit the guy's hand. And so they only spray him like in the face instead of the ear. And then they detain the 2 Mossad agents, and the other 2 drive away and flee. And then the king of Jordan at the time then calls Netanyahu and says, hey, we have your 2 Mossad agents, and unless you want us to make a grand spectacle out of this worldwide, turn this into an international scandal, you send us the antidote to this poison right now. And so Netanyahu had no choice but to send the poison anecdote to Jordan, and then they gave it to the Hamas leader. Yeah. Okay. And so that scandal, of course, is reported in Israeli media. Like that becomes like a thing. And so that leads to the opposition able to call for new elections Like he loses his coalition, and then Ehud Barak runs against him with Tony Blair like publicly backing him, right? And remember, Ehud Barak is at the very center of the whole Epstein scandal, as is Tony Blair. Like Tony Blair and Ehud Barak were both Epstein guys. So that's what makes this very interesting. So then over the next, 10 years, Netanyahu is in and out of office, and Ehud Barak is always on the opposite side of like these political, these binaries. Now, to your point, it's all uniparty to some extent. So was it all just kayfabe? Maybe it was. But what's interesting is the reports from, Barak Ravid, who I think does convey exactly what the Trump administration tells him. The way he reports these meetings that were happening back in October, this is like after Netanyahu, remember, bombs Qatar the day before Charlie Kirk had shot.
Yeah, right.
They bombed Qatar. Ron Dermer, who is Netanyahu's right-hand man, is at the White House while Tony Blair's there, while Kushner's there, while Witkoff's there, and they're holding a meeting in the Oval Office to discuss the Gaza peace plan. Like they're developing it. This is right before they come out and announce the Gaza peace plan. And Ron Dermer, they make wait out in the hallway like a schoolboy. And then at the end of the meeting, after they've discussed everything, Trump says, all right, let's bring in Ron so we can get his take and Netanyahu's take. And then Ron Dermer's brought in to give his feedback. And they're like, all right, Ron, here's what we decided to do without you in the room. Now give us your feedback. And so that's how Netanyahu's been treated. And so I'm wondering, like, my theory on all this, Matt, like there are people who think that this is all being orchestrated, like, and instead of it being a game theory plan, it's really like Netanyahu is working with Trump to kind of facilitate this exposure operation of Israel. That could be true. I don't know. The way I look at it is that Trump understands what Netanyahu's incentive structure is. He understands what his motivations are and his ambitions. And he's basically laying out the game board so that Netanyahu, as he traverses the game board, he has no choice but to be corralled into a specific limited set of options. That's game theory. And then you can control outcomes. So putting people in his path, such as Tony Blair, who has been a career obstacle for Netanyahu, right? That I think is telegraphing something to Netanyahu that is not being telegraphed to the general public. The general public is not picking up on the fact that Tony Blair being involved is like a stick in the eye to Netanyahu, but Netanyahu is certainly going to pick up on that. The fact that Ron Dermer is being left outside of the Oval Office while Tony Blair's in there talking about what's going to happen with Gaza after the war's over, that's a stick in the eye. Meanwhile, Tony Blair has apparently, since like the 2000s, Tony Blair has been developing this reconstruction plan for Gaza ever since I think the 2006 war. What is Gaza going to look like after like we free it as a concentration camp from Israel? So one thing that we've talked about on Badlands that we've noticed that Trump does is he goes to these globalists who have these grand plans, and rather than using his own energy to like fight them and say, I actually want to be in charge of this, he kind of just puts them front and center and he says, hey, you want to join my team? Like, you have a great idea, but join my team. He allows them to expend their energy, and he basically like a NASCAR driver in a NASCAR race is drafting off of their momentum and conserving his own energy, conserving his own fuel. And then at the last possible second, he basically ejects them, overtakes them, and then just takes control of the situation. And so he does that time and time again with every single narrative. Venezuela would be another example. And it allows him to basically conserve energy while allowing these neocons and these enemies to expose themselves, because as they are being encouraged by Trump to go out there and say the thing that they've always secretly thought, but they didn't publicly want to express it, they're like, well, Trump's super popular and everyone loves him. So if he's saying that I should say this, then I'm definitely going to say it. And so Lindsey Graham's like, yeah, of course we should overthrow Iran. Rick Scott, yeah, of course we should overthrow Cuba and Nicaragua and Mexico and Colombia. Like, yeah, like this is awesome. And like the MAGA king is sitting here endorsing this. Like, hell yeah. And everyone else, meanwhile, is looking at Rick Scott like, wow, what a sociopath to think that you feel comfortable now shamelessly saying this stuff.
Well, on that note, actually here, let me ask a follow-up question here. So within the game theory sphere of motivations, does eschatology play into that? Like, do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu is more motivated by self-preservation, profit, what have you, staying out of jail? Or do you think that a religious, like, eschatological motive for, let's say, doing the Jabotinsky thing of building greater Israel to usher in the Messiah is more of a a higher priority in his ambition?
Well, I think it's both. So I think that Netanyahu was raised by men, like you said. Jabotinsky was his father was his secretary. So I think he was raised by men like Jabotinsky, and surrounded by them as a boy, who basically put these ideas in his head and his older brother's head that like y'all are going to be the prodigal sons who are going to come forth and deliver, like y'all are the secular Messiah, basically, right? Because in their religion, they believe that there's a secular Messiah, kind of like John the Baptist, who's going to pave the way for the real Messiah, for what I would call the Antichrist, but they would call Moshiach. And so, like the Rebbe from the Chabad Lubavitch, like he said to Netanyahu in 1990 on camera, like you are the one.
Speed it up,
like speed it up, like you're the chosen one. The time is running short. Hurry up and get this done. So I do think that's his core motivation, that he sees himself as like the rest of us are just ants. We're all just insects in the way. And what we want to do to him is to stop him is insignificant, because he's on this path. He's been anointed by all of the holy men from his world that he is the chosen one and he has to do this. Meanwhile, he probably recognizes the realities of like the secular world, that right now, there are people who want to put him in prison, and he looks like he might go to prison. So he has to navigate that and avoid those pitfalls in the immediate, while kind of like brushing it off and being like, yeah, this is all nonsense. He doesn't respect the courts at all. Anytime the courts hold a hearing, he's like, oh, I have a tummy ache, I can't come in today. Like that's what he's over and over and over again. He's like, I don't feel well, I can't come in to testify today. And so this thing has been delayed for years. And then Trump's kind of leaned into that. He's been like, hey, we should pardon Netanyahu. Netanyahu shouldn't be prosecuted for these crimes, even though the evidence for at least two of them is open and shut, that he was doing this stuff, that he did exactly what they were accused of. So I do think that it's like both. I think he's motivated by an astrological outcome. But up until a few years ago, that was basically, he was able to basically operate as just a secular political figure that was achieving this stuff in secret, like these are secret plans. But because of the realities of the domestic political landscape in Israel in December 2022, he was forced into a relationship with these radicals who openly espouse that secret plan and openly celebrate, we are going to establish greater Israel, we are going to summon the Messiah, we are going to bring about the golden age of Jewish dominance and Jewish supremacy, because that's what's written in our holy texts. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has never been somebody who ever publicly admits to that stuff, but these guys are, and now he is dependent on them politically, because without their support, he can't remain in power.
So, okay, about on January 6th, there was an article that I saw announcing that Israeli military has been ordered to prepare for war on all fronts, and that was when the Iranian protests were still running hot. They've simmered down since then, and there's also within that IDF call a program that was put on the table to expand space-based warfare by the IDF, or by, I guess, Israeli forces. I'm not too sure who would run that. Not the IDF. It would be another agency, I suppose. But where do you think that is right now? Like, do you think Smotrich, Netanyahu and company, but I guess more the radical Smotrich faction, do you think that they currently, is there still a danger of the pressure cooker being heated up on the Iran front or Lebanon or elsewhere at the moment? Or do you think that that's complete, that we've passed through that fire and now it's calmer seas by far with no danger? Because I ask because, it seems like there was a gearing up. I don't know if that ended. And it seems like also, U.S. Warships were sent from the Indian Ocean down to, I guess, I'm not sure if it's the Straits of Hormuz or where, but somewhere more in proximity to Iran. Gulf of Aden, I guess, was one of those locations where the what do you think about that? Do you think that the Iran situation is better now, and that these guys, the hotheads, are a little bit cooler, or do you think that that's still a danger to upset the apple cart?
Well, so there's two really important factors here that to consider. about the Iran thing, because I think the Iran thing was something that was put in, that I think the plans were laid out for Iran for a very, very long time. And it didn't unfold the way it was supposed to. And here's what I mean by that. Let me share my screen here.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott Ritter is not somebody I would describe as pro-Trump. I mean, he was pro-Trump during the campaign last year, but he has also been highly critical of Trump's rhetoric and Trump's behavior, because he basically he drinks the Kool-Aid on Trump's a neocon. He's betrayed the populist movement. He's doing exactly what all of the globalists, the George Bush faction, wants to do. Like, why is he doing this stuff? So he is not somebody who goes out there and puts lipstick on a pig, from his perspective, to spin it in Trump's favor, right? He actually, I think, has been very critical of Trump over the past year and all the things that Trump has been doing geopolitically. However, listen to his analysis here on the Iran situation.
This was something that was cooked up in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, Lindsey Graham has admitted it. This is something that Netanyahu and Trump cooked up when Netanyahu was visiting Mar-a-Lago. This was all planned. There was extensive planning going on between the Mossad, the CIA, British intelligence, Dutch intelligence, and every intelligence agency in the world that has been lined up against the Iranians. And yet the United States didn't pull the trigger until it was too late. And I just have to sit there and go, Trump knew what he was doing. I mean, it seems to me that Trump set up Lindsey Graham, set up Netanyahu, set them all up because they shot their bolt. The Mossad network that was used is gone, finished. I mean, the Israelis panicked in the end. When they lost communication with them, they tried to shove in a whole bunch of new Starlink, communication kits. And the Iranians were just sitting there waiting for him to come in and go, thank you very much, thank you very much. Because the Iranians broke the code, got in there. Thanks to the help of Russia, by the way. So it's all over. That entire network's gone. It took decades to build that network up. It's gone. So Graham knows what happened. There is no capacity to, replicate the opportunity that was lost. Now, he's trying to be nice and say it's not Donald Trump's fault. It's 100% Donald Trump's fault. And you have to ask yourself, was this deliberate? Is it just incompetence, which I can also accept, or was this deliberate? A setup so that Netanyahu and Graham and everybody else stops talking to him about overthrowing the Iranian regime because they no longer have the tools to do so.
Yeah, and so I actually think that he is spot on. I think that is a spot on assessment. And when you combine that with, number one, the fact that Arakchi, the Iranian foreign minister, said the same thing. He said that Russia helped them significantly with the whole Starlink thing. Mm-hmm. You look at the sequence of events and how things unfolded in Iran. Basically, you had these protests began, right? You had the Republicans, the neocons, the media ginning up support for it and being like, yep, here we go, here we go. Trump comes in and pours jet fuel on the whole thing and says, go Iranian patriots, take control of the institutions. Keep track of the names of the bad actors. We'll take care of them. Don't you worry. But we are here. We're going to help you. Help is on the way. Meanwhile, remember, the help that would have been on the way would have been the USS Abraham Lincoln, the carrier strike group that was located in the Eastern Mediterranean, but was sent back on November 18th to the Caribbean to deal with Nicolas Maduro. So the whole time he's sitting there saying this would have been January 13th. I saw the Atlantic Council, those analysts were all coming out and saying, wait a minute, there's nobody to help. Our carrier strike groups are all in the Caribbean because they were helping out with Venezuela. And it's going to take a week for them to get back here. That's the window that Scott Ritter's talking about. There was a window where a military strike would have traditionally been seen as, here's the opportunity, strike the leadership, take out their capacity to respond to this, and then allow the Bolshevik protesters, the color revolution operatives, to seize the means of control, right? That never happened. The military strikes never happened. Even though Lindsey Graham was sitting there saying, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go. And therefore, the internet gets shut down, Starlink gets activated. And then, as Scott Ritter just explained, because Starlink got activated, the Russians used the Starlink to pinpoint. They used the Starlink system to pinpoint where all the operators were, where the people were who were actually organizing the demonstrations.
Yeah, and they were able to then purge
Yeah.
all of the provocateurs and agents controlling the. I like that.
Because they had their communications, they had, and remember, these people were decapitating police officers, they were burning ambulances, they were burning mosques, they were throwing Molotov cocktails at the government buildings. These were real provocateurs, not just like your run-of-the-mill, thugs on the street. These people were definitely trained up. And as Scott Ritter said, decades and decades and decades to get all these people in place so that at the right moment you press the button, say go, and they all go. Now the Iranian government has basically cracked down on all these people. They stuck their heads up like snakes, and they all lost their heads. And then you combine that with this. This is
also yes, right. You got it. Go on.
This former defense minister Avigdor Lieberman. Now remember, Avigdor Lieberman's the guy who resigned from the Netanyahu government in 2018 when Netanyahu came out and said, hey, we have an opportunity here. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are in a fight right now because Hamas allegedly tried to kill the Palestinian Authority's prime minister when he went to Gaza to negotiate the surrender of the government administration to the Palestinian Authority. They've now cut them off financially. Hamas, the Palestinian Authority they've cut them off financially. Let's go to Qatar, get some cash from them, and then give the cash to Hamas, keep them afloat, and encourage them to engage in militancy against the Palestinian Authority. If they can overthrow the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and take control, we will then have two militant Palestinian governments in Gaza and the West Bank, and then we can use that in the long term to justify a military campaign to annex both of them. And that was when Avigdor Lieberman said, wait a minute, you're talking about funding Hamas? Absolutely not. He resigns and goes public with the information and says, Netanyahu is talking about funding Hamas. So here he is. He says, Iran targeted Israel's strategic objectives in the war. He's talking about back in June. So he comes out and he says, and we were not ready to defend ourselves. Newspapers reported that Netanyahu asked Trump to postpone an attack on Iran because of gaps in our defense readiness. Despite having the world's best air force, we saw the true power of Iran's ballistic missiles, Imad-1, Shahab-3, Khorram Shah, and others, which destroyed a laboratory and wiped out decades of accumulated research, data, and findings. So that's what happened back in June when they were when Iran was firing missiles at Israel. Israel was launching planes at Iran. Apparently, Iran took out like key strategic defense targets in Israel, and that has, as a result, left them in a real pickle as opposed when it comes to defending against another attack. So Netanyahu allegedly went to Trump and said, "Hey, slow down on like your rhetoric. Like, slow down. Like, we wanted this to happen a little slower than this because we are not quite ready to defend against a major attack. And I don't know if you noticed, Mr. President, but you don't have a carrier strike group in the area to protect us. So without a carrier strike group, without the Abraham Lincoln there in the Mediterranean to protect Israel from these missiles, we are like a sitting duck."
Yes.
So this is, in my opinion, the game theory that basically puts them in the situation where they have to back down, even though all the operatives on the ground in Iran have been given the green light and they're going full tilt. And it's like the Bay of Pigs in reverse. It's like we sent the Contras into Cuba. We put them on the beach, told them to move forward, promised that we would provide the artillery support.
Gave no air support. Yeah.
No air support, gave no artillery support, and they were just left to die on the beach. That's exactly what happened in Iran, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Okay. I like that. And I just realized as you were talking that we forgot to do something very special that we do at the beginning of every show, that I was so enthusiastic to catch up with you that I totally neglected today's sponsors. So we're going to take a brief little moment to listen to a word from Tamara Garden and then Rise Attire. All right, are you looking for a better alternative to the over-the-counter drugstore medications? Tamara Garden began from a parent's desperate need for safe and effective options for their kids, tired of toxic chemicals. Taking matters into their own hands, they began crafting medicine from weeds, wildflowers, and herbs, the original time-tested healers that modern medicine cannot match. Packed with antiviral herbs to boost immunity and fight illness, Tamara Gardens has, for a limited time, their elderberry and rose hips syrup kit available. Not only is it delicious, no more battles with kids, and easy to make, it will help you and your family. It'll keep you and your family healthy all fall and winter. Introducing Tamara Garden's new baby line, clean, non-toxic, and gentle for newborns and moms, relieving cradle cap, diaper rash, stretch marks, and postpartum pain. Visit TamarakGarden.com today and use promo code Badlands for $10 off orders over $50. Remember to eat your weeds. TamarakGarden.com, promo code Badlands. All right. So that was Tamarack, and now we've got a word from Rise Attire.
What is the Sovereign Alliance? The Sovereign Alliance are a collection of leaders and countries that are aligned not in the vision for their countries, but against a vision that has been thrust upon them. I believe that the Sovereign Alliance is less a battle for something and more a battle against something. They are against globalism, collectivism. They are against the rules-based international order.
Sovereign Alliance, the latest addition to Badlands Rise merch, available now at badlandsmedia.tv/rise.
All right, cool. All right, sweet. So I appreciate those. Yeah, go
check
on.
check your mic input switch.
It always happens every bloody time.
It always happens whenever you play a video, I think.
Ah, okay. Here we go. Okay, is that better?
Much better.
Okay. All right, good. All right. So we got these points here. I think one thing, jumping back to the question of Greenland as well, since it is looking more and more like it's going to be taken away from Denmark. Denmark really didn't have much of a claim over it. It would really help the case as well for Russia. I mean, and also for China taking Taiwan. Russia's, argument for why it has needed to go into Ukraine will be bolstered quite a bit, considering, obviously there would be the hypocrisy will have gotten very loud if this happens. So I could definitely see why both the Russians and the Chinese would not necessarily be in any way seriously opposed to the U.S. Securing its basically increasing its security by taking Greenland as a whole. But do you think that in any way people in Trump's inner circle believe the rhetoric that it's to protect America against Russia or China's interests in developing, the Arctic Passage and things like that, or expanding the Iron Dome to have a missile shield pointed at Russia and China from the Arctic? Or do you think that do you think that the Iron Dome is not really going to happen if Greenland's taken? Or do you think that wouldn't be a threat to Russia and China if it were built?
Well, the Iron Dome might happen.
The Golden Dome.
The Golden Dome might happen. The more I think about it, the more, it does make sense that if you're looking at long-term security, and the idea is that it is a ballistic missile array defense system. It's not meant as an offensive system, but it's a defensive system. That was something that Putin proposed to George Bush when he came into office in 2001, right?
We said that Russia should co-control it.
Yeah, that Russia and the United States should work together to basically develop what Trump is talking about right now, to talk about develop a Golden Dome for both Russia and the United States that would also protect Europe. And that would not only be a symbolic gesture to bring to be the end of the Cold War, but it would also kind of ensure that ICBMs were no longer a threat, and would in a lot of ways nullify the threat of nuclear war, because you couldn't fire a nuclear weapon via ICBM through the upper atmosphere. So I do think that there's probably some merit to it the more that I've thought about it. But again, like the thing that kind of threw me off in the beginning was just Trump's cartoonish rhetoric about it. The way Trump talks about these things is to gin up, it's to provoke people into speaking about it. If he said it in a really, really diplomatic way, in a way that made people feel good, then people would be less likely to discuss it and debate it. But when he says it in a really boisterous, kind of like belligerent way, his unique style, that's what provokes the debate, and the debate is healthy. We should be discussing are these good things to be happening? And maybe they are, but we should understand why are they good things to be happening? Not just because Donald Trump says they're good, but is there actually a moral principle behind it that makes it an imperative? And I think that those arguments can certainly be made. Now, as far as Greenland goes, this just happened while we were live. Here's Trump holding a meeting with Sisi from Egypt, and he's asked about the military going into Greenland. Listen to what he says.
What prompted you to take military off the table for Greenland?
Thank you, press.
Thank you.
We'll all see what happens. The military's not on the table. I don't think it'll be necessary. I really don't. I think people are going to use better judgment, use their best judgment, and I don't think that will not be necessary.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Bryce. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you, Bryce.
Okay, so that right there like affirms the theory that I was telling you before. It's like this is the model, the template that Trump uses on every single thing that he does. It's like he says the provocative thing in the very provocative way. He doubles down on it. He triples down on it, and he gets everyone worked up, right? So then everyone is very energized and it's a catalyst to get people to talk about these things. And all the bad people, who a lot of them are right in Trump's orbit, they're then coming out and saying, well, yes, of course we're going to go after Greenland militarily. Of course we're going to go after Cuba militarily and Nicaragua and Colombia and all the other ones because we're America. And then at the very last second, Trump steps off the rug, and then the rug goes crashing into the wall with Lindsey Graham and his friends all on it. I mean, over and over and over and over again, we've seen this happen. That's him stepping off the rug. The military is not going to be necessary. And of course it's not going to be necessary because a war between Denmark and the United States, like it's not going to happen. Like Denmark is not going to attack the United States militarily. Neither is Canada, neither is Britain, neither is anybody in NATO. Primarily because they don't have the military to do it. Like it isn't even about whether they can get their allies to join them or whatever.
Yeah.
All of them together can't fight the United States. I mean, all of NATO together could not fight the United States. And half of NATO would say, thanks, but no thanks. We're not doing that.
Yeah. What do you think of this proposition by the French, the Germans, and I guess it was Macron Starmer who was involved to deliver a counter proposition to Trump, saying, "Hey, rather than you taking Greenland, how about we develop a NATO Arctic force that will be specifically for the Arctic and will be stationed on Greenland, and we'll all be happy with that." What do you think of that proposition?
I didn't see that, but that again, that's like the deep state trying to like this is moves and counter moves. Like Trump proposes something like this, and they're like, "Hey, if you're really worried about military defense, we're all about military defense. Why don't we develop a new NATO military defense infrastructure for this?" Basically, what they're saying is, "Why don't you give us billions of dollars, just like you've been giving to NATO for decades, and we will develop an Arctic defense force." And I think Trump's response to that is going to be, yeah, pound sand, guys. Like, we, the United States, want to have direct control over this, and we don't want any other cooks in the kitchen messing up the recipe. So we want ownership. We don't want to lease it. We want to buy it. You're going to give it to us, and that's how this is going to go. I speculated in the news brief a week ago that this was all posturing for negotiation with Denmark to basically get into a situation where we own Greenland and we own the resources and we are able to use it freely however we want, but we don't have to take responsibility for the 60,000 people living there. Because I think that's the one thing where it's like, I don't want those people as American citizens. I don't care if the white nationalists all say, well, they're white and they're European, so we love them. We want them as. I think that is watering down our culture by bringing these socialist Europeans into our system and allowing them.
Well, that's also the same danger, the same logic that could apply to Canada too, which has a British run culture of servants of empire. Basically, by and large, there are exceptions and wonderful Canadians who are found as outliers, I would say, and many of them are in Alberta. And sparsely, you find clusters of legitimate patriots, but by and large, there are so many Trojan horses that you would be bringing into the United States if the boundaries under current cultural rotten circumstances were expanded. Even the Canadian military just put forth a white paper addressing, and I have to read the actual contents. I just read a summary from it. Basically now bringing back online, Defense Scheme 1, basically, scenarios preparing for how do we respond to a U.S. Military invasion, where they basically acknowledge that we don't have a military, so we can't do much. But then they say we can learn from the Afghan Taliban, and we can learn from asymmetrical warfare techniques, which at first I'm thinking, well, we don't really have the type of warrior population that the Taliban had cultivated over many years living a hard desert lifestyle. But do we have fanatics that could be useful idiots that could carry out eco-terrorism and other things it's a very underpopulated country, right? I mean, there's only 7 major cities in all of Canada. big territory, 7 cities. It's nothing. And 80 or 90% of the population lives like 70 kilometers from the US border. So it's like, it's not really a country in that sense. And there's a lot of terrain that could be used for all sorts of asymmetrical stuff, training camps, what have you. That's a danger for sure. So you definitely want to approach, on top of the fact that you've got radicalized, woke, eco-terror recruiting, Antifa adjacent professors in various universities who are more than happy to recruit their useful idiot students into ideological cells that we know have already been incubated for many, many, many decades, and that are protected by big forces within Ottawa, within the deep state structures of Canada from the top, who are grooming and protecting these agencies. So definitely you want to be very careful with how you approach this troubling question of the British asset called Canada.
Yeah.
But it's definitely going to be an interesting coming few years, that's for sure, to see how things unfold. Because as I was saying at the very beginning, Carney, I really do believe his purpose does play into a model that has been at the heart of most of America's problems for well over 150 years, as far as, the role that Canada played over a century ago, right when the U.S. had purchased Alaska. The only reason why there wasn't the successful building of rail lines upwards through British Columbia into Alaska was because the British deployed a strategy that used Canada as their piece of real estate, as a wedge, blocking and destabilizing that potential emergence of a new world of cooperation and a genuinely new golden age. And I could see that with Carney and his approach being much more, he's much more intelligent than idiot Justin Trudeau, who was more on like a Zelensky level intellect, much more of a walking joke. Carney's much more competent. He's deployed for he's highly vetted. And I think his mandate is to block any type of potential alliance, a genuine alliance based on natural law, even if it means the empire doing stuff it doesn't want to do. Even if it means temporarily saying that, well, this
burning assets. Ceding ground, burning assets, like retreating and saying, okay, you can have this, you can have that, things that they never thought they would.
Exactly. Or even like allowing for some industrial growth, trying to incentivize or bribe the Albertans who have a big independence-minded orientation from wanting to have a full-blown referendum, which is moving fast right now. The potential of Alberta independence is much higher now than ever before. So I could see clearly Carney trying to persuade them to stay locked into the crown by saying, we'll let you build pipelines, we'll let you build these things that we've been stopping for decades, we've been preventing you from developing your economy, now we'll let you do it so you can have some prosperity. It'll feed into maybe a burgeoning surveillance state with AI overlords, that we're going to be trying to bring online. That's another aspect of it. But overall, it's to prevent the British Empire from losing this terrain, and also to seduce China. I think that they're trying to weaken the China-Russia relationship economically. And China definitely needs inputs of a variety of minerals and resources from abroad. And increasingly, when you look at the world map as it stands, a lot of those areas that it relied upon are seeing a big spike of destabilizations. So with that increased uncertainty of how China is going to be able to guarantee the necessary resources that it needs to maintain its almost 2 billion people, Russia obviously only has a certain capacity to provide. It's limited still, though. I think the argument is now being put forth once again, as it was over a decade ago, by the British that are controlling Canada, to say to China, hey, look, you can get these minerals even cheaper than you can from Russia, from Canada. But that means you have to get enmeshed, get addicted to the Canadian system. And maybe that would also mean, I would imagine this is going on behind the scenes, is giving British agents in Canada more authorization to play a role in managing or shaping policy for the Asia Infrastructure Development Bank, for other institutions that China has created for its purposes. I think, looking at Carney, his different networks that are tied to the Bronfmans, and their interests, or the Desmarais family and the Power Corps family of Quebec, which has a huge, huge hand inside of China. I think that they've been kept at bay. They've been kept at a distance. They've been allowed to do business deals with China. They've been allowed to make money, but they've not been allowed to have a say up until now in how policy is managed, how institutions are wired. So I think that's part of it too, is to allow for a Trojan horse called Canada to infiltrate China and destabilize them. And that's I've been saying this now for really since February of last year. It's about, and I really, really, really think that that's the strategy. And I'm quite confident that there's a lot of very smart people in China who understand the evils and sophistication of the British Empire's global, strategies and their assets. But there's a lot who aren't. There's a lot who have influence who are not that aware. And I'm really hoping that they stay sharp on this stuff, because otherwise this is going to be a problem both for the U.S. and for China. It's already a problem for Russia, but for China and the U.S. could also suffer quite a bit if they don't recognize how this game is wired and has been wired for over 150 years.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if Mark Carney was like the actual plan 10, 15 years ago was for Mark Carney to go into politics. Like, I think he probably would have been happy just having his puppets. His career has been being a central banker who controls the puppets that are the politicians, right? I mean, 10 years as a member of the board of directors for the World Economic Forum. He was a central player in the climate change agenda that was the 2030 agenda, right? Like, he's been the one of the architects of this new world order that George Bush talked about. And yet Donald Trump comes on the scene and then makes significant strides, ostensibly loses the election in 2020. Biden comes back in, and it looks like maybe the deep state is going to save themselves. And then Trump then wins the election last year and comes in, and all of a sudden Mark Carney has to come in off the bench and step in and say, you know what, I'll just do it myself, right? That's what it feels like. It feels like this wasn't supposed to happen, and he can't trust this important task to one of his puppets because the puppets are not competent enough to understand the grand plan. He has to be able to wield the power himself and operate. That's the way I read the situation now that you've educated me on who Mark Carney is. So that's the way I read it. And I think you're right about, I think you're right about about his plans here, that they want to use Canada to drive a wedge between the sovereign alliance and go after Canada and drive the wedge between Russia and America. They do not want, I don't think, Alaska and the U.S. to be connected via pipeline and railroad. They don't want that to happen because they don't want Russia and Alaska to be connected via pipeline and railroad. That would be detrimental to their plans. But they may recognize that there are certain things they're going to have to retreat a little bit, kind of like when the CIA, when they're compromised and they have to exfil from one of their forward operating bases, they have to burn everything, put it on bags, burn everything. We're getting the hell out of here, right? They have to surrender all of that intel and destroy it because otherwise the enemy's going to get it. It's like, that's what I think is kind of happening here. That's my read on it. But I think that when you look at, for example, the pipelines here in Virginia, they were going to build this massive pipeline system from West Virginia down through Virginia to Virginia Beach to develop a huge liquid natural gas system. And basically what the George Soros people did is, after they failed to shut down the project, they went into the rural counties in Virginia where there's very little money in politics. I mean, $7,000 will win you a prosecutor's seat, right? And I know that because I participated in the election. I've been on that side of it and helped a prosecutor run for office. They went in there and they bought the elections. They won, they installed their people, the prosecutors, the judges, all that. And then they used lawfare to shut down the rights so that the counties were like, okay, the project's approved at the grand scale, but the individual county said, we're not going to approve the easements for your pipeline running through our county. So you can't run your pipeline through our county now. And because of that, because the way the federalist system is working, and the local counties have to buy into what the upper levels of government are doing, they basically they weaponized the local governments against the state governments and said, you can't do this pipeline project because the local governments won't approve it. And as a net result, no liquid natural gas pipeline. And as a net result, the gas prices in Virginia spiked because the project got shut down. That's the same thing you're talking about here with the pipeline in Canada and how the British tried to shut down the pipelines and the railroads. And Trump, of course, is a real estate developer, and he's dealt with this bullshit his entire life. He knows all about bureaucratic red tape and how politics and government will shut down very, very reasonable, smart projects that make all the sense in the world and that are going to benefit everybody, a universal benefit, because of a political agenda. I think he knows exactly how to navigate around this stuff and operate. And that's part of what he's doing here with Greenland. It's what he's going to do with Canada. It's what he's doing with Venezuela and everything else. I think all of it is just moves and counter moves, where he escalates rhetoric, he accelerates rhetoric, he gets the narrative really, really hyper and really, really high. So everyone's freaking out and there's all this anxiety. And then he steps off the rug and says, nope, there's not going to be a war. Sorry.
Yeah. That seems to be the theme. So look, before we round out today's show, do we have any questions or anything in the chats or anything like that are worth popping up, or is it a little silent?
If anyone has a question, throw it in the chat now and we will address it. If there's a topic you want us to address.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I've kind of gone down, I think I presented a few weeks ago to you, like my thesis on the Venezuelan devolution thing. But what I've discovered since then is, I won't go through it all here. I've done it on other shows. Most of the audience has probably heard it, but basically write down this name, Matthias Krull, Mahtias. His last name is Krull, Krull. Look into that guy. Basically what happens is, I told you about the lawsuit that Maduro filed in 2018.
Yep.
So they file the lawsuit in Geneva. They alert the Swiss authorities as to like the lawsuit, and then within days, the Swiss authorities go and they raid the Helsinki office. Helsinki is Helsinge. That is a bank based out of Panama and is basically the chief defendant in this lawsuit. The lawsuit names oil companies, banks, all this, but the number one defendant target in it is Helsinki, which was brokering a lot of these oil auction contracts for Venezuela. And they go and they raid the office, they take all their computers, and then 4 months later, this is March 2018, 4 months later, June 25th, 2018, the Helsinki office in Miami is raided, and this guy, Matthias Krull, is arrested. And the DOJ puts out a press statement, and they say this guy was laundering $1.2 billion for all the banks that were embezzling the money from PDVSA from Venezuela. He was not, but the task force that arrests him is not like just the typical fraud task force, bank task force. It's the cartel, the drug cartel task force, the organized crime task force goes and arrests him. And they allege that not only was he laundering money for the banks and the oil companies, but he was also laundering the money for the traditional cartels. And so then a month later, August 22nd, there's another press statement put out by the DOJ. You can go look this one up. And he confesses to everything. He pleads guilty to everything. And he says, Judge, I'm guilty of everything y'all are accusing me of. I will cooperate 100%. And the judge says, I'm giving you 10 years in prison. If you cooperate 100%, we will give you clemency. And they end up taking 65% of his sentence is reduced. And apparently, as I understand, that's the most a federal judge has ever taken off of a sentence that he has imposed. And it's because he cooperates fully. He gives them everything, the full roadmap for how these banks launder this money through the entire banking system. And the one that's targeted is Credit Suisse. Credit Suisse has all their assets seized. That leads to their collapse in 2023, where then UBS is forced to buy them out by the Swiss government, which then leads the Saudis to criticize the play and encourage everyone to pull their money out of the Swiss banking system. And now that the sanctions have been lifted, that Besson has lifted the sanctions, Trump signed an executive order to put all the money in a Qatari escrow account, and nobody's allowed to put liens on it. Nobody's allowed to go after the money who thinks they're owed money by the Venezuelan government. I think we're going to see the entire international financial system now be exposed for being the cartels. And just by coincidence, Matt, 3 days ago, you had an analyst at the was it the Bank of England who came out and said, hey, the entire financial system is about to collapse because the U.S. government is disclosing that aliens are real.
Yeah.
No. The timing of that, because if you read what she says in her disclosure, she says this has been happening for years. For years, the government of America has been posturing that they're going to disclose that aliens are real.
Yeah.
Why, of all the times to put this warning out there, they're choosing whatever it was, January 16th, January 17th, 2026. Of all the moments to do that, right when Trump lifts the sanctions on Venezuela, and the likelihood of all of this being exposed, that the entire international banking system, the biggest banks in the world, were laundering money that was being stolen by Venezuela, but they were also laundering money for the cartels that Maduro is being accused of being the head of. It's the stage is basically being set for the financial system to be brought to its knees in the best possible way. And it's all because of Nicolas Maduro being ostensibly removed from power, so the sanctions can justifiably be lifted.
Well, I mean, these are great points. I mean, for me, I still think that the system was built to blow in order to,
of course,
usher in a new age for many decades.
Of course,
and the whole UFO thing is something that they've been working on since the earliest days of the Cold War to create a new religion. So yeah, no, I mean, is this going to be the trigger? Is it going to be a trigger that is detonated by good actors who have a good plan, or is it going to be a trigger that unleashes a more chaotic demolition with the destruction of supply chains and things that result in mass death and starvation and hell for a period? I don't know yet. I'd be curious. Definitely, this is not to be ignored. What you just brought up, these are a very important sign of something major happening. And the flushing, I think, of a lot of the old guard mafia crime syndicates that played a role for many decades. You know, the Corsican, the Sicilian, the Jewish mafia, all of these different narco terror operations that deal with the infrastructure of producing the drugs either in laboratories or in cocaine fields or in heroin poppy fields, and then transforming it with the control of the laboratories, the motion of these things, which requires massive organization and organized crime networks to make it happen, protected by intelligence agencies. That's been going on for a long time as part of the wiring of the machine. Is that finally being shut down? Seems so. It seems so that old mechanism is no longer tolerable. Again, my concern here is that it seems like RFK is pushing for a mass legalization of psychedelics across the board, psilocybins, DMTs, other things, as part of this new drug revolution to promote a new kind of holy sacrament or what have you for the new age. As far as I see the role of a lot of these psychedelic drugs being a part of the creation of a new type of holy ceremony to worship God or gods or whatever they are. In my mind, I'm wondering, is that the preferable kind of new soma? That's my paranoid side, right? That's my suspicious side, always thinking to myself, like, these scenarios. I'm thinking, well, is it possible that the old way of doing drugs, heroin, cocaine, other things, and the associated infrastructure is no longer tolerable, and now we're going to have a new kind of drug culture that's going to be introduced that's a little bit more centralized, a little bit more tied to something which is, when I look at who's been behind the growth of the UFO cult, and I look at Lawrence Rockefeller, I look at the CIA, I look at the same agencies that were also behind creating psilocybins and DMT and LSD in the first place in the 50s and the 60s and disseminating it. It's these same Lawrence Rockefeller connected agencies that were behind both UFO disclosure and drug, normalization as well at the same time. And I see potential convergences. So that's my concern side. On the positive side, maybe that's not the case at all. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there actually is a genuine flushing out of the drug culture more broadly, and God willing that that's the case. I really hope that it is, and we'll see, I guess, how it unfolds in the coming months ahead.
Last thing I'll point to with this bank discussion is the comments that were made yesterday at Davos. G Money, who you're familiar with now, right? G Money is the most anti-central banker person you'll meet in this movement. He is the one who says nothing else matters except the discussion about the fiat financial system. That's the only discussion that matters. Everything else is noise. Everything else is a waste of our time and distraction. If you're not talking about the financial system and the fiat currency, then you are irrelevant. That's what G Money says. All right. Sure. Bitcoin is digital 1776. That's what his famous line is. Right. And so he has also been saying, as I've learned his ideas and what drives him, he has said that the tokenization of assets, particularly digital assets, that's the future. He said we needed to tokenize everything, whether it's the deed to your house, the deed to your car. And by tokenizing it, that prevents people from stealing it. That prevents them from printing money. If every dollar is tokenized, if everything is tokenized, then that prevents, with the right encryption systems, that prevents these bankers from doing traditional fiat banking, central banking, right? So yesterday we got affirmation of that because we had two people, Larry Fink.
They're all interconnected, and that's
Here's Larry Fink.
But now let's go into the future. What are some of the mega trends that are going to reshape investing, asset management as you look forward?
I mean, there's two, but they're all interconnected, and that's going to be AI and tokenization of financial assets. So digital assets, those are the two mega trends that are going to totally reshape financial services. I had a lunch today with a very prominent former finance minister, central bank, very prominent guy. And he wrote a big paper on tokenization.
Right.
And he would say, he couldn't say it in his former role, but he would say it today as a private citizen. The banking system is being left behind in so many ways through technology.
But now let's go into
G Money's thesis has been for a while now that Larry Fink is captured. Larry Fink is all the rhetoric Larry Fink has been putting out for the past whatever year or so has been pro Bitcoin, pro tokenization, pro all the things. And remember, this is all he focuses on. Is focusing on how do we defeat the central banks and where are the pitfalls and where are the opportunities for them to lead us back into the slaughterhouse. And now Larry Fink is saying the exact same thing that G Money's been saying for the past 3 or 4 years. On top of that, you also had this guy, Ray Dalio, who happens to be the CEO of UBS Bank, the bank that was forced by the Swiss government to purchase Credit Suisse when Credit Suisse went bankrupt in 2023. Here's him responding to a question about this on CNBC.
Step back from the sensational and be clear about what I mean. The monetary order is breaking down. Okay. What I mean by the monetary order is that fiat currencies and debt as a storehold of wealth is not being held by central banks in the same way, and that there was a change. The biggest market to move last year was the gold market, far better than the tech markets, right, and so on. And the U.S. markets underperformed foreign markets because of the fact you could see it in the numbers of the central banks and so on. So let's just look at the fact that on the other side of trade deficits and trade wars, there are capital and capital wars. And so as we're looking at that, and you reported what the stock market and so on, but you didn't report that the gold market is also up 3.
We did say that earlier this morning.
Okay.
It's up to
But
record
I'm
levels
saying,
again and silver.
Is you look at what is happening and why it's happening and who's buying it. So let's just take a moment on that capital war issue, okay? We know that both the holders of US dollar denominated debt, which is money, and those who need it, the United States, are worried about each other, right? So if you have other countries who are holding it and they're worried about each other and we're producing a lot of it, that's a big issue, right? So you have to explain what is going on with fiat currencies, generally speaking. And now if you take the conflicts, you can't ignore the possibility that capital wars, in other words, maybe there's not the same inclination to buy U.S. debt and so on. We at least need to talk about those possibilities and find out who is buying and selling what that is behind these market movements. And what?
Yeah. And so, and after like last night, gold broke through 4,800 and is like at like new all-time highs. So, you know, it's no sign of it slowing down. And again, this is the guy who, like UBS Bank, was forced by the Swiss government to purchase Credit Suisse in order to avoid a financial crisis. And that purchase is what then drove the Saudis to say everyone needs to pull their money out of the Swiss financial system because it's no longer reliable. If the government is going to impose itself on the banking system like this, then we can't trust the Swiss anymore. Meanwhile, you have Trump in Davos today bashing the Swiss, hammering the Swiss over and over and over and over and over and over again. And if you go look at who was targeted by Operation Money Flight, which is the operation that arrested that guy, Matthias Krull, they went after the Swiss banks. They went after Jules Baer. They went after Credit Suisse. They went after a number of Swiss banks. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening. I can't fully synthesize it to make perfect sense of it. But it seems like it's all connected, and it seems like the financial system, the fiat financial system, is in total disarray now and is facing collapse. And that's not me saying that. That is the purveyors of it. The central bankers are now saying that.
Well, definitely the Swiss bankers have been a bane on the existence of humanity.
Yes.
Long before the American Revolution, you know, you've got the Gallatin, the various, the Prévost family, the Mallets, all of these core families that played such a big role in organizing and creating the American deep state, and that were operated out of Genoa, you know, this city-state empire that also, or not, it interfaced with Genoa. It interfaced with them very closely and had a big tentacle inside of Switzerland, and established this hub of international financial warfare. So that's where the Bank of International Settlements was set up, as far as the thing that Carney directly worked for as the head of the Financial Stability Board. It's part of the BIS, as the central bank of central banks. Yep. So the fact that
Warhamster will tell you that's one of the most nefarious banking institutions in the world is the Bank of International Settlements, and like what they've done to destroy the developing world and to destroy the developed world. They're one of the worst culprits out there.
Oh yes. They're so bad, and they should have been shut down. I mean, there was actually a vote at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 that set up the new financial architecture after World War II. It was at Bretton Woods that the details were hashed out, and battles took place between the American and the British factions. And there was actually a unanimous vote, except for the British, who refrained from voting at the very end of it, featuring 66 countries of the world, most of whom who had been victimized brutally by the British Empire for centuries. They voted to shut down the BIS at the end of World War II. And unfortunately, that never happened. All of the people who had led that fight inside of the U.S. patriotic circles were purged. Roosevelt died far too soon. All of his allies were also purged. And the thing itself just grew and grew and grew in power and influence over the next 80 years to the point that we see it today. So if there's actually something to pull the carpet out from under its feet underway, I find that interesting. I'm always curious or cautious about, the question of who controls the code around which the Bitcoin systems are going to be operating, who's controlling. Is it going to actually have true decentralization, or will there be a secret centralization behind it? Who controls the blockchain? As far as, I could very clearly see that being misused under the wrong hands to measure and map out all of our actions, are bad thoughts or bad behavior. And that's always a concern. But definitely, it's interesting. I'll give it that. There's that. Things have gotten a lot more interesting than they ever have been in my adult life. So yes, that's something.
Correct.
All right. So I guess with that, if there's no other pressing questions or comments or donations, I guess we could round it out. Did you see anything pressing?
Let me check. Let me check Badlands Boost. If you're listening on replay, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost and leave a Rumble rant at any time. And let's see, we do have one from today. We have a few actually from the past couple of days. We have from C. Loranovna, $60. Great to be back listening to your show, Matt. I read your America book series aloud for rehab post epilepsy surgery and enjoyed it more the second time with this show as context. You are I can't say this word. Indefatigable. Am I saying that right?
I can't pronounce that word either. I think it's indefatigable, but I don't know.
It's a great word. That's a $20 word.
That's 2026. We're going to master that word by the end of 2026. We'll start using that.
And I appreciate yours and Gordon's work so much. And I'm familiar with this user. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that she spent time in Guyana. I'm glad to hear that your surgery went well, because we were messaging and she said she was about to go in for surgery. And I still am interested to speak to her about Guyana. So if that's who I think it is, I'm glad to hear that you're resting up, and I'm glad to hear that everything went well.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. I'm glad my books could help in the recovery process of your surgery. So yeah, thank you very much.
And yes, and thank you for the generous boost. So we have another one, son of Kaczynski. $5. Growing up, I ruminated on the mounds of dirty laundry as a will-breaking test that never ends, but now I believe there is a way. That is very poetic and insightful, and many such cases. Okay, so I think let me just go back and make sure that we don't, because it's been so long since I feel like we've done the show together.
Yeah.
I think we're good. I think that takes us back to like before Christmas. Let me see. Well, wait, there's SCOIN S3 from December 21st. I don't know if we read this or not because you and I have not done a show together, I feel like, in a while. But $20, always thankful that Gordon and Matt do this show and teach me so much history and give me so much insight into the world. I had your teaching when I was in school. If I had your teaching when I was in school, I would have loved history so much more. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Well, thank you, SKOIN S3, for being here. And everyone else, please hit the thumbs up. And we will see y'all next week.
Absolutely. All right. Till next week. Bye, y'all.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.